Hi ladies, this is Rachel and today I'm going to be talking to you about inflammation and periods. This is a huge topic and quite a number of ladies suffer period pains without realising inflammation has a role to play. So some interesting statistics for you. 50% of women who have gone through puberty have suffered from dysmenorrhea, which is heavy periods at some point. 10% have taken a day off work. This was a survey done by Feminax. And a further 40% have said it affects their concentration at work. So a shocking number of women do suffer period pains, but we don't talk about it very often. And a lot of it is down to inflammation. There are other factors as well, such as womb position, which I've talked about in the past, and I can put a link to that below. But there are a number of different reasons why we get period pain, but one of them is inflammation, and this is what causes that crampy sensation. It can cause migraines, it can cause nausea, it can cause a whole host of symptoms. Before we go off on the sort of warpath about inflammation itself isn't a bad thing. Inflammation is there to help your body respond to various pathogens to recover and heal and move onwards. The type of inflammation I'm going to talk about today is prostaglandins and the omega fatty acids. So we have prostaglandin PGE1 and prostaglandin PGE2. PGE1 is the anti-inflammatory prostaglandin and PGE2 is the inflammatory one. Now ideally, in an ideal world, we should have 50% of anti-inflammatory and 50% of inflammatory so that our body can respond to pathogens and other things, but then it can also dull down that response when it's not necessary. So when we eat fatty acids, so omega-3 and omega-6, and some of you will have heard about this, these are what essentially determine whether we're going to be more anti-inflammatory or more inflammatory. So omega-3s are anti-inflammatory and omega-6s are more inflammatory. There are some anti-inflammatory omega-6s, but that's a subject for another day. Ideally, this ratio should be 1:1, up to 4:1 in some people, so up to 4 times the amount of omega-6 to 1 omega-3, depending on which study you look at. Unfortunately, in the Western world, it's close to 20:1, 16:1, or in some cases even 30:1, again, depending which study you look at. So clearly this is a problem, and this is more the inflammation that causes crampy types of pains. And a lot of it can be determined by what you eat. So first of all, omega-3s and 6s, they're fatty acids, they're found in fats and oils. Oil is fat at room temperature that is liquid. So I'm going to just give you a list of the inflammatory ones. I have to write it out because I never remember. So we've got all the standard vegetable and seed oils. So the chances are if it's cheap seed oil or cheap vegetable oil, it's going to be inflammatory. Some examples that are really common are palm oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, peanut oil. It's also worth mentioning as well, peanuts are also inflammatory. Margarine, shortening. And then also as well, we've got meat. So corn-fed meat and grain-fed meat are inflammatory because they've eaten inflammatory foods such as grains. So they tend to have a higher omega-6 profile. Whereas organic free-range farmed meat, especially if it's not been injected with antibiotics or growth hormones, tends to be more anti-inflammatory in its profile. Interestingly enough as well, there was a study done in women that ate red meat, and the more red meat women ate, the higher amounts of something called arachidonic acid was found in them, and the women with higher levels of arachidonic acid had higher levels of PGE2, that's the inflammatory prostaglandin, and higher reported incidences of period pain. So red meat tends to be inflammatory, but what the study didn't look at was whether it was organic, whether it was grass-fed, whether it was grain-fed, whether it was corn-fed. But generally, too much red meat can be inflammatory. Things that you can eat instead, so this is the much more nicer bit. Fish and meat that has been free range, that has been fed grass, or obviously not fish, that has had a wild diet rather than farmed fish. In fact, recently there was a survey published showing that farmed salmon had half the amount of omega-3s as wild salmon. But it still obviously have more than lots of other foods, so please, if you only have access to farmed salmon, it's still a good source of omega-3s. Avocados, eggs are a really good source of all the fatty acids and cholesterol, so please don't shy away from eggs. Coconut oil and coconut butter are really good ones to have as well. So let's look at the good list. So we've got olive oil. Olive oil is great, especially cold. I tend to use olive oil for cold foods, and I try to use coconut oil if I have it handy for cooking. I do sometimes use olive oil, but as soon as it hits its smoke point, as in it smokes, then you're turning it into an inflammatory food. Ghee, lard and grass-fed butter are all fine as long as you're not dairy sensitive. And then we've also got certain seeds such as flaxseed and chia seed. Many seeds and nuts have both omega-3s and omega-6s in, so you do need to check out their fatty acid profiles. Some nuts are actually more legumes, such as peanuts, are actually just have omega-6s in, so they're purely inflammatory. Obviously, deep-fried fatty foods are more inflammatory than anti-inflammatory, so it really is pretty obvious sometimes as to which foods are going to be the better ones for you. So that is inflammation, the inflammatory ratios and how they relate to period pain. I am opening the enrolment for the Autumn Cleanse at the moment, which will take you through a healthy eating plan week by week. It's 4 weeks of videos in which we go through meal planning, we go through meal preparation, we go through all the emotional pre-work in advance in order to be able to be successful in cleansing, and there's an online support group as well. So if you're interested in joining me for that, you get your recipe book, you'll get videos telling you what to do each week, which will support you through the process. Do have a look at the link below. Alright, if you have any questions, do feel free to email me at rachel@thehealthywomb.com, and take care. Bye!